The large spaceship named Horizon moved slowly through the empty blackness of space. Inside the ship, John Carter sat at his workstation. He looked out at the stars with his own eyes instead of letting the ship's computers do all the work. Most people thought this was a waste of time, but John liked to do things the old way. "Carter, why do you keep staring out there?" "The sensors can see better than you," said Frank Miller, who worked at the station next to him. John shrugged. "I just see things differently sometimes." The Horizon was a research ship from Earth. Its job was to check out strange energy readings in this far corner of space. The best scientists back home couldn't figure out what was causing these readings. Captain Lisa Vaughn had ordered everyone to be extra careful during this mission. John had been on the ship for 3 years now. People knew him as the quiet guy who sometimes found things that the machines missed. He had a special talent that no one could explain. He could spot tiny details that others overlooked. As the ship drifted past a field of asteroids, John noticed something odd. It wasn't exactly a shape. It was more like a slight bend in the light from distant stars. He blinked and looked again. Yes, something was definitely there. "Hey, Miller, take a look at Sector 7, John said, pointing to the spot. Frank looked where John was pointing. "I don't see anything. The sensors don't pick up anything either." "Just look harder. There's a kind of ripple in space." Frank stared for a long time, then shook his head. "Nothing there, Carter. Maybe you need some sleep." But John couldn't let it go. The strange distortion seemed to move slightly as he watched it. He checked all the sensor readings himself. Nothing showed up on any of them. During lunch in the ship's cafeteria, John sat with Susan Wright, the ship's science officer. She was one of the few people who took his hunches seriously. "Susan, I saw something out there today," he said quietly. She looked up from her food. "What kind of something?" "I don't know how to explain it. Like a shadow that isn't attached to anything, or a ripple in water, except it's in space." Susan's eyes showed interest. "Where exactly?" "Near the outer edge of the asteroid field. But no one else can see it, and the sensors show nothing." Susan thought for a moment. "Remember last year when you spotted that small comet fragment that almost hit us? The sensors missed it completely." John nodded. That incident had saved the ship from serious damage. "I'll talk to the captain," Susan said. "Maybe we should check it out." Later that day, John stood nervously in front of Captain Vaughn. She was a fair leader but didn't like wasting time on wild guesses. "Lieutenant Carter, Officer Wright tells me you've seen something unusual," the captain said. "Yes, Captain. I know it sounds strange, but there's something out there that doesn't show up on our equipment." Captain Vaughn studied him. "What makes you so sure?" "I just know. Like I knew about the comet fragment last year." The captain was quiet for a moment. "Give the coordinates to navigation. We'll move closer and take a look. But if we find nothing, we're continuing with our scheduled mission immediately." "Thank you, Captain." As the Horizon changed course toward the spot John had seen, he returned to his station. The distortion was clearer now. It seemed to pulse gently, like something breathing. "Still nothing on sensors," Frank announced. "Keep watching," John said. As they got closer, John felt a strange sensation in his head, like a soft whisper. No words, just a feeling that something was trying to reach out to him. The ship's lights flickered suddenly. "What's happening?" someone shouted. All around them, screens went dark as the ship's power failed. For a terrifying moment, they floated in complete darkness. Then the emergency lights came on, casting an eerie red glow across the bridge. And there, right in front of John, a figure began to appear. It was made of swirling light, shaped vaguely like a human but transparent. No one else seemed to notice it. The figure raised what looked like a hand and pointed directly at John. In that moment, he knew his life would never be the same again. "Power systems failing across all decks," shouted Frank Miller as he hit buttons that did nothing. The red emergency lights cast strange shadows across the bridge of the horizon. The crew moved quickly to their emergency stations while Captain Vaughn tried to stay calm. "Report. What happened to our systems?" she demanded. But John Carter wasn't listening to any of this. His eyes were fixed on the glowing figure that hovered in front of him. It was shaped like a woman made of soft blue light. She was beautiful in a strange way, with flowing movements like underwater plants moving with the tide. The weird thing was that no one else seemed to see her. They all rushed around, worried about the ship, while this glowing woman floated right in the middle of the room. "Hello," John whispered. "Can you hear me?" The figure tilted what looked like her head. Then John heard a voice inside his mind. "You see me. How is this possible?" John looked around. No one else reacted to the voice. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "My name is—" The closest word in your language would be Ilara. "I am what you might call a luminary." "Lieutenant Carter, what are you doing?" "Help restore communications." Captain Vaughn's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. John turned to her. "Captain, there's someone here. Right in front of me." The captain frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Focus on the emergency." "I'm serious. The thing I saw out in space. She's here now. She's talking to me." Susan Wright moved closer to him. "John, there's nothing there." John pointed directly at the glowing figure. "She's right here. She says her name is Ilara." The captain and Susan exchanged worried looks. Inside his head, Ilara spoke again. "They cannot see me. Only you. Your brain processes visual information differently from other humans." "Why are you here?" John asked. "Did you shut down our ship?" "I did not mean to harm your vessel. My approach caused a temporary disruption in your energy systems. They will restore soon." As if on cue, the main lights flickered back on. Screens lit up around the bridge, and relieved voices called out as systems came back online. "All systems returning to normal, Captain," reported Susan. "No permanent damage detected." Captain Vaughn turned to John with a serious face. "Carter, I need to know what's going on. You're talking to empty air." John took a deep breath. "Captain, I know this sounds crazy, but we've made contact with an alien species. They'd been here all along, but no one could see them until now." "He speaks the truth," Ilara's voice said in John's mind. "For reasons I do not understand, his brain can detect our presence when all other species cannot." John repeated her words to the captain. "That's quite a claim, Lieutenant," said Captain Vaughn. "I need more proof than just your word." Ilara moved closer to John. "I can show a small sign of my presence." Suddenly, a coffee mug on a nearby desk rose into the air and hung there. Several crew members gasped. The mug turned slowly, then gently settled back down. "Does that help?" John asked with a small smile. The captain's mouth fell open. Yes, that's a start." Ilara's voice filled John's mind again. "My people have existed alongside yours and many others for thousands of years. We live slightly out of phase with your reality. We watch, we learn, but we never interfere." "Then why show yourself now?" John asked. "Because you saw me when no one should have been able to. This has never happened before. My leaders need to understand how this is possible." Captain Vaughn had ordered everyone to their stations while she spoke privately with John. "What does it want?" "She says her people are called the Luminary. They exist in the same space as us, but in a different phase, which is why we can't see them. They've been watching other species for thousands of years." Ilara moved toward the window, pointing outward. "There, my home." John looked where she was pointing. The distortion he had seen earlier was now clearer to him. It seemed to shimmer with hidden light. "She wants to take me to her world," John told the captain. "To meet her people." Captain Vaughn shook her head. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "Captain," John said seriously, "this could be the most important first contact in human history. Someone has to go." Ilara's light pulsed gently. "You will be safe, John Carter. You have my word. The captain considered this for a long moment. How do we know we can trust them? John looked at Ilara's glowing form and somehow felt certain. I trust her, Captain. Let me go. After much discussion, Captain Vaughn finally agreed to let John visit the Luminary world. But she set strict rules. He had to wear a special suit with cameras, stay in constant radio contact, and return within 3 hours. If anything seems wrong, you come back immediately, she told John as crew members helped him into the suit. Susan Wright checked his equipment one last time. The cameras probably won't show much if only you can see these beings, but we'll try to record everything. John nodded, feeling both excited and nervous. Ilara waited patiently nearby, her light form glowing softly. Are you ready? Her voice asked in his mind. Ready as I'll ever be, John replied. Ilara moved closer to him. This may feel strange. I need to adjust your perception to fully see our world. She reached out and touched his forehead with what seemed like a hand made of light. A warm feeling spread through John's body, and his vision blurred. What's happening? Captain Vaughn asked sharply, seeing John wobble. She's helping me see their world better, John explained, blinking as his vision slowly cleared. And then he gasped. Where before he had only seen a slight distortion in space, now he saw an entire city floating among the asteroids. Buildings made of crystal and light stretched out in all directions. They glowed with soft colors that shifted like the northern lights back on Earth. Can you see this? He asked over the radio. Back on the ship, the crew watched the video feed from his suit. We just see some blurry lights, Susan answered. Nothing clear. Ilara guided John through an opening in what looked like a transparent bubble surrounding the city. As they passed through, John felt a strange tingling sensation. Inside, he could breathe normally, and Ilara told him he could remove his helmet. Our atmosphere is compatible with yours, she explained. When John took off his helmet, he saw even more clearly. The city was beautiful beyond words. Thousands of luminari moved through the streets and buildings. They all glowed like Ilara, but in slightly different colors and shapes. How long has this been here? John asked in wonder. We established this settlement over 2,000 of your Earth years ago, Ilara said. We have many such cities throughout what you call the galaxy. She led John to a large building in the center of the city. Inside, a group of brighter, more intense light beings waited for them. This is our council, Ilara explained. They wish to understand how you can see us. One of the brightest figures moved forward. I am Elder Zoran, a deep voice said in John's mind. Your ability troubles us. Our invisibility has protected us for millennia. John tried to appear respectful. I don't understand it either. I've always been able to see things others miss. The council members communicated with each other through pulses of light that John couldn't understand. Finally, Elder Zoran spoke again. We must determine if you are a threat to our safety. John felt suddenly afraid. I'm not a threat. My people don't want to harm anyone. We're explorers. Yet humans have a history of violence. Another council member said, We have observed your wars. We've made mistakes, John admitted, but we're trying to be better. Meeting you could help us learn and grow. Ilara moved beside him. I believe him, elders. There is honesty in his mind. Elder Zoran seemed to consider this. We will need to examine your neural patterns. Before John could respond, the room filled with a blinding light. John felt like his mind was being gently opened and read like a book. It didn't hurt, but he could feel the luminary moving through his memories and thoughts. Just as suddenly, the light faded. The council members pulsed with new patterns. Remarkable, Elder Zoran said. Your brain has a rare variation. You perceive wavelengths beyond normal human capacity. What does that mean? John asked. It means you are unique among your kind, Ilara explained. A bridge between our worlds. Elder Zoran moved closer. We must decide what to do about this development. The safety of our people comes first. John stood tall, I hope you'll choose friendship. There's so much our species could learn from each other." The council began to discuss among themselves again, leaving John to wonder what would happen next. While the Luminary Council was still talking about what to do with John, Ilara suddenly stiffened. Her light dimmed for a moment, and she turned toward one of the crystal walls. "What's wrong?" John asked, noticing her change. All the luminary in the room stopped their discussion. They seemed to be listening to something John couldn't hear. Elder Zoran floated quickly to a large crystal in the center of the room. He touched it, and the crystal lit up with swirling patterns. John couldn't understand what he was seeing, but the luminary's reaction told him it was bad news. "What's happening?" John asked again. Ilara turned to him, her light pulsing with what seemed like worry. "Danger approaches. The Void Hunters." "Void Hunters? What are those?" "Ancient enemies," Elder Zoran explained. "They consume energy in all forms. They are the reason we developed our ability to remain unseen." On the crystal display, John could now make out dark shapes moving through space. They looked like black clouds with tentacles of darkness stretching out from them. "How dangerous are they?" John asked. "They nearly destroyed our entire species long ago," Ilara said. "We survived only by learning to hide ourselves from all detection." Elder Zoran moved closer to John. "And now your ship has drawn them here. Your engines emit energy patterns they can sense from great distances." John felt a chill run through him. "My ship. The horizon is in danger." "All of us are in danger," Ilara said. "The hunters do not discriminate between energy sources. They will consume your ship, our city, everything." John touched the radio on his suit. "Captain Vaughn, can you hear me?" After some static, the captain's voice came through. "We hear you, Lieutenant. What's happening there?" "Captain, we have a serious problem. There are hostile entities called Void Hunters approaching our position. They're drawn to energy sources like our ship." There was a pause before the captain responded. "Our sensors are picking up something now. Large objects moving toward us at high speed. What are we dealing with here, Carter?" John looked at Ilara for help explaining. "They absorb all forms of energy," she told him. "Your weapons will be useless against them. They will drain your ship's power and then consume the life energy of your crew." John relayed this information to the captain. "How long do we have?" Captain Vaughn asked. Elder Zoran touched the crystal again. "At their current speed, less than 6 hours." John passed this on to the captain, who responded immediately. "Then we need to leave now. Return to the ship immediately, Lieutenant." John looked at the Luminary Council. "What about you? Will you be safe?" The Luminary exchanged pulses of light before Elder Zoran answered. "We will hide as we always have. But now that the hunters know this region contains energy sources, they will linger. It may be centuries before it is safe for us here again." John thought for a moment. There must be another way. "Can we fight them together?" "Fight?" Ilara seemed confused. "We have never fought the hunters. We only hide." "But now they know you're here," John pointed out. "And if my ship tries to leave, they'll just follow us back to human space, putting more people in danger." The captain's voice came through the radio again. "Carter, what's the delay? We need to move." "Captain," John said firmly, "I think we should stay and help the Luminary. If these hunters follow us home, Earth could be in danger too." There was a long pause. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" John looked at the Luminary Council. "These beings have amazing technology. If they've never tried fighting back, maybe that's because they never had allies before. Maybe together we can find a way to defeat these hunters." Elder Zoran and the other council members pulsed with rapid light patterns. "It is not our way to engage in violence," Elder Zoran said. "Sometimes you have to fight to protect what matters," John replied. "My people learned that lesson long ago. Let us help you." Ilara moved to John's side. "I believe he is right, elders. Perhaps this is why he was meant to find us." The council room fell silent as everyone waited for Elder Zoran's decision. Elder Zoran's light pulsed slowly as he thought about John's suggestion. Finally, he spoke. In all our history, we have never fought the Void Hunters. But perhaps that is why they still hunt us after so many thousands of years. The other council members flickered with what seemed like uncertainty. We will consider your offer of help, human, Elder Zoran continued. But how can your kind assist us when your technology is far less advanced than ours? John smiled. Sometimes having less advanced technology forces you to think in different ways. Let me bring some of my crew here. Together, we might find a solution that neither of us would discover alone. After more discussion, the luminary agreed. John contacted Captain Vaughn and explained the situation. She was hesitant, but finally agreed to send Susan Wright and the ship's engineer, Greg Harris, to join John. When Susan and Greg arrived at the luminary city, they couldn't see anything until Ilara adjusted their perception, just as she had done for John. Their amazement at seeing the hidden world for the first time made John smile. "It's incredible," Susan whispered, looking around at the crystal buildings and glowing beings. Greg was already examining the luminary technology with wide eyes. "Their energy systems are like nothing I've ever seen." They gathered in a large room where the luminary had created a detailed map showing the approach of the Void Hunters. The dark shapes were moving closer by the minute. "Tell us about these hunters," Susan asked. "What exactly are they?" Ilara explained. "They began as normal creatures but evolved to feed on pure energy instead of matter. They can absorb any form of energy, electrical, thermal, even the life energy of living beings. That's why our weapons wouldn't work," Greg realized. "They would just absorb the energy from our lasers or explosives." "Exactly," said Elder Zoran. "And that is why we chose to hide rather than fight." John looked thoughtfully at the map. "But everything has a weakness. What happens when they feed? How do they process the energy they absorb?" Ilara and the other luminary seemed confused by the question. "They simply consume it," Ilara said. "They grow stronger and larger." Greg snapped his fingers suddenly. "What if we gave them too much to handle? Like overeating until you get sick?" Susan nodded excitedly. "Energy overload. If we could create an energy source so powerful that they couldn't process it all at once." The luminary began to understand. Their lights pulsed more quickly as they discussed the idea among themselves. "It might work," Elder Zoran admitted, "but it would require an enormous amount of energy, more than we can safely generate." John contacted Captain Vaughn again. "Captain, we have a plan, but we need the Horizon's help. We need to use the ship's main reactor as bait." The captain's voice was firm. "Absolutely not. I won't risk my ship and crew." "We don't need to sacrifice the ship," Greg explained. "Just modify the reactor to create a controlled overload, enough to attract the hunters, but not enough to actually destroy the ship." After more discussion, Captain Vaughn reluctantly agreed to the plan. Greg and several luminary engineers began working on modifying the Horizon's power systems. Meanwhile, John and Ilara worked on a second part of the plan. The luminary had technology that could channel energy in ways humans hadn't discovered yet. They designed special devices that could be placed around the hunters once they were drawn to the ship. "These will create an energy feedback loop," Ilara explained. "When the hunters try to feed, the energy will cycle back through them faster than they can absorb it." As they worked together, John noticed something interesting. The humans and luminary had very different ways of thinking about problems. The luminary thought in terms of harmony and balance, while the humans thought in terms of action and reaction. Together, they created solutions neither would have found alone. Time was running short. The Void Hunters would arrive in less than 2 hours. The question on everyone's mind was, would their plan work, or were they all about to be consumed by the hungry darkness approaching from deep space? The time for planning was over. The Void Hunters had arrived at the edge of the asteroid field, their dark forms moving like giant shadows against the stars. From the bridge of the horizon, They looked like black clouds with long tentacles reaching out hungrily toward any source of energy. They're even more terrifying than I imagined, Captain Vaughn said quietly as she watched them approach on the ship's view screen. John, Susan, and Gray had returned to the ship to help with their part of the plan. Ilara had come with them, though only John could see her without special help. Is everyone in position? John asked over the radio. Around the asteroid field, small teams of luminary had placed the special energy devices they had built. The Horizon floated in the center, its reactor modified to emit an energy signature that would be irresistible to the hunters. All teams report ready, Ilara confirmed after communicating with her people. Greg was in the engine room, watching the reactor levels carefully. Reactor is at 80% of maximum output. Any higher, and we risk a real overload. Captain Vaughn nodded. Let's begin. All crew to emergency stations. Greg increased the reactor output. The ship hummed with power as energy readings spiked. Out in space, the Void Hunters immediately changed direction, heading straight for the horizon. They've taken the bait, Susan reported, watching the sensors. The dark shapes move faster now, excited by the promise of so much energy. The closest one reached out with long tendrils of darkness toward the ship. Hold steady, John said. Let them get closer to the device network. Everyone on the bridge held their breath as the first hunter wrapped its dark form around the ship. The lights flickered as it began to drain energy from the ship's systems. Power levels dropping, Greg reported from the engine room. Shields down to 60%. More hunters arrived, surrounding the ship. The plan was working. They were all gathering in one place. But the danger was real. If they drained too much power before the trap was ready, the Horizon would be helpless. Now, Captain Vaughn asked, gripping her chair as the ship shuddered. John looked at Ilara, who was communicating with the luminary teams. She nodded. Now, John shouted. All around the asteroid field, the luminary activated their devices. Beams of bright energy shot out, connecting each device and forming a net around the area where the Horizon and the hunters floated. Energy feedback loop engaged, Susan reported. It's working. The hunters seemed confused. The energy they were draining from the ship was suddenly flowing back into them, faster and more powerful than before. They tried to break away, but the energy net held them in place. One of the smaller hunters began to pulse strangely. Its dark form flickered with flashes of light. Suddenly, it burst apart like a balloon, dissolving into nothing. It worked. Greg shouted over the radio. They can't handle the energy feedback. But the largest hunter, which seemed to be the leader, was adapting quickly. It stopped absorbing energy and began to move toward one of the luminary devices. It's trying to destroy the network, Ilara warned. John realized they needed to do something quickly. We need to overload the main hunter directly. If it's destroyed, the others might lose direction. How do we do that? Captain Vaughn asked. John looked at Ilara. Can your people channel all the energy from the network into just the leader? Ilara's light dimmed with concern. It might work, but it would require someone to manually reset each device, someone who can move between them quickly. I'll do it, John said without hesitation. Captain Vaughn shook her head. That's too dangerous, Lieutenant. I have to try, John insisted. I'm the only one who can see the luminary clearly without help. I'll take a shuttle. Before anyone could argue further, John headed for the shuttle bay. Ilara followed him. I'm coming with you, she said. You'll need my help to adjust the devices. Together, they boarded a small shuttle and launched into the chaos of the battle. All around them, hunters were fighting against the energy net, while the luminary struggled to maintain it. Let's go, John said, steering toward the first device. We have a lot of work to do. John piloted the small shuttle through the chaos of the battle. Dark tentacles of the Void Hunters reached for them, but Ilara used her abilities to bend light around their ship, making it harder for the hunters to see them. There's the first device, Ilara said, pointing to a glowing object attached to an asteroid. John landed the shuttle carefully. They both hurried outside, wearing spacesuits. John's hands worked quickly, following Ilara's instructions to reset the device. Now it will direct all its energy toward the lead hunter, Ilara explained. They repeated this process at 4 more devices, narrowly escaping the searching tentacles of the hunters each time. From their position, they could see the horizon still surrounded by several smaller hunters, its lights flickering as the ship fought to maintain power. Just 1 more device, Ilara said, but it's very close to the lead hunter. John took a deep breath. Then that's where we're going. He steered the shuttle toward the last device. As they approached, the massive form of the lead hunter sensed them. A huge black tentacle swung toward their small ship. "Look out!" Ilara cried. John rolled the shuttle sideways, barely avoiding the strike. But the hunter was learning quickly. Another tentacle appeared from below, hitting the shuttle and sending it spinning. "We're losing control," John said, fighting with the controls. The shuttle crashed into a small asteroid not far from the last device. The crash damaged their shuttle badly. Air was leaking from John's suit where it had been torn. "My suit is damaged," he said, his breathing getting faster. "I don't have much time." Ilara's light pulsed with worry. "You must return to your ship." "No," John said firmly. "We have to finish this or everyone dies." He climbed out of the damaged shuttle, moving carefully toward the final device. The lead hunter loomed above them, its dark form blocking out the stars. "I'll distract it," Ilara said suddenly. She flew upward, her light glowing brighter than John had ever seen. The hunter turned toward her, reaching out hungrily. John used this chance to reach the device. His hands were shaking as he made the final adjustments. His oxygen was running low, and he was starting to feel dizzy. "It's done," he shouted over the radio. All around the battlefield, the energy beams from each device suddenly changed direction. They all pointed toward the lead hunter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the beams connected, forming a bright net around the massive creature. The hunter writhed as energy poured into it from all directions. Its dark form began to glow from within, brighter and brighter. With a silent explosion, it burst apart into nothing. Without their leader, the smaller hunters seemed confused. Some of them broke apart on their own. Others fled into deep space. John smiled as he watched them go. Then he noticed his oxygen indicator flashing red. He tried to move back toward the shuttle, but his legs felt too heavy. Suddenly, Ilara was beside him. "Hold on, John," her voice said in his mind. She wrapped her light form around him and began flying toward the horizon. John felt warmth spreading through his body as she somehow shared her energy with him. When they reached the ship, medical teams rushed to help John. As they treated him, Captain Vaughn approached with a big smile. "You did it, Lieutenant. You saved us all." Later, when John had recovered, the Luminary Council came aboard the horizon. For the first time, using technology developed during the battle, all humans could see them. Elder Zoran spoke to the gathered crew. "For thousands of years, we have hidden from others. But today we learned that sometimes we need friends, not just shadows." A formal alliance was made between humans and Luminary. John was named the official ambassador to the Luminary, with Ilara as his counterpart. As the horizon prepared to return home with news of their discovery, John stood with Ilara watching the stars. "No one saw you," he said softly, "until a human did." Ilara's light pulsed warmly. "And now everything has changed for both our worlds."